All right, welcome to our first lecture for the historical introduction to cryptology. So in this lecture, I will briefly talk about 5 topics: historical ciphers, frequency analysis, playfair cipher, the unbreakable cipher, or in other names, one-time pad. Then I will talk about enigma and cryptanalysis. So from pen and paper methods, we will go to devices, machines, and computers. So this is the main idea of this week's lecture. So in the first part, let me give you the definition so that we can agree on every term, because you hear things like cryptology and cryptography, so you might think, what is the difference? So actually the word cryptology is the name of this science, okay? But in order to give a definition, I have to explain it in 2 or 3 paragraphs. But if you want to give a single sentence definition, I think the best one is this, probably given by Rivers, saying that cryptology is about secure communication in an insecure channel or unsecure channel. So we always assume that the communication channel is unsecure. Somebody is listening to your communication. But even we know that somebody is listening and recording our communications, we want to communicate in a secure way. So cryptology actually allows this. So generally, cryptology is divided into 2 subcategories: cryptography and cryptanalysis. Cryptography is about designing secure crypto systems, and cryptanalysis is about analyzing or breaking these crypto systems or ciphers. So in order to design something good, actually you have to know how to break it. So this is the whole idea. But of course, today the words cryptology and cryptography are used interchangeably. So both in English or in any language, like in Turkish, we use the cryptology and cryptography as they are the same thing. Okay, so these definitions are not that correct anymore. So you can say that it's for instance, this course is titled Applied Cryptology, but I could change it to Applied Cryptography. But cryptographers generally use the word cryptography. And those people who don't know much about cryptography uses the word cryptology, so you can actually understand if a person has cryptography background or not by looking at which word they choose. Okay, so let's look at the big picture. Cryptography solves a lot of problems because, as we mentioned, it allows you to communicate securely in an unsecure channel, right? So it solves a lot of problems. If we want to give the main ones, the first one is the privacy of stored data, messages, and conversations. Actually, here we are talking about encryption, okay? And actually, I have to talk about not 2 things like stored. I don't need to use the stored word here. Actually, we need to encrypt 3 types of data, and we call it data at rest, data in transit, and data in progress, okay? Data at rest is actually, for instance, a file in your computer, so it stays there, but you also need to encrypt that, right? But we also need to encrypt data in transit because, for instance, if you're talking with your mobile phone, or currently we are having a Zoom session and so on, we need to encrypt the data which is in transit. I'm sending the data, all of the internet communication, you are creating that data at that time, but you also have to encrypt it. So this is data in transit, and we can do it again. But third one is data in progress. So this is somewhat new because we put a lot of our data to cloud, and we work on that data like Amazon services, right? But if I give it as a plain text, then Amazon also has my data. Maybe it is a private data, so I don't want them to see it. So ideal thing to have is to put it in an encrypted way, but still work on that data. So homomorphic encryption actually allows you this, and it is becoming more practical every day. So we can also solve that problem, but we need some optimizations because the encryption and that kind of process, homomorphic encryption, currently is not that fast. So currently we are trying to have better implementations. We are trying to come up with optimizations for GPUs or FPGAs, but still we can solve this problem, okay? So data don't need to be stored all the time like it is written here. It may be in transit, but it may be also in process, okay? We also solve the integrity of these data by using hash functions or message authentication codes, also by authenticated encryption. This actually, by integrity, we mean that if a file is or data is modified without our knowledge, we can easily detect it. This is the nice thing. And for forensics, this is important because at the crime scene, if you see a data, you have to be sure that it is not changed months later. Okay. We also solve the problem of user and data authentication. User authentication is provided by public key cryptography, right? And by the data authentication, you can use authenticated encryption, which is more popular these days. And finally, we solve the transaction non-repudiation. This means that if you perform an action, then you cannot deny it. And this is here we talk about digital signatures. It is very important, all of the internet actually communication and so on, or the blockchains, everything rely on digital signatures. So it also solves these problems. So throughout this course, we will cover all of these topics and see how we solve all of these problems, okay? So let's go back to definitions again and talk about what is a cryptosystem or a cipher. So plaintext is what you want to protect, okay? So it can be a file on your computer, it can be a WhatsApp message, an SMS message, or your voice when you are calling somebody and talking, okay? All of them are plaintext. And the cryptosystem or a cipher is a pair of algorithms that convert plaintext to ciphertext and back. So you actually have a pair of algorithms, encryption and decryption. And once you perform the encryption, your plaintext is converted into ciphertext. And ciphertext should appear like a random sequence. So you have the plaintext, you encrypt it, and you send the ciphertext through the unsecure channel so that we assume that everybody captures our ciphertext, but we hope that if we design the algorithm in a good way, they cannot obtain the plaintext from the ciphertext. Okay, this is the whole aim. Only the person, you and the person you want to communicate has some secret knowledge so that you can encrypt and they can decrypt. That is the idea behind it, but the terms here are important. Again, I use the word random in bold. As you will see throughout this course, we will use the word random a lot. So this is why at some point I have to talk randomness in cryptography. Okay. So historical ciphers are mostly pen and paper methods. Key and the crypto system should be easy to use in practice because you are going to use pen and paper. These are mostly based on letter substitution, so you replace one letter with another. Sometimes pair of letters are replaced by pair of letters. Most of the time, empty spaces and punctuation marks are removed from the ciphertext to avoid information leakage. Because if you know the length of the words, then you can easily guess what they are. Okay, so let's look at Caesar cipher. Every letter is replaced by a letter, some fixed number of positions k down the alphabet. This is used in ancient Rome, and it is supposedly invented by Julius Caesar. So idea is simple. You write your plaintext, okay? No empty spaces, no punctuation marks. And here you choose your secret key as 2. So every letter is replaced by 2 down the alphabet. And in some other documents, they may say that not 2 down, but 2 upwards. But it doesn't matter. Going 2 down actually means if you're using the English alphabet, you have 26 letters. Going 2 down equivalent to going 24 in the other way around. Okay, this is a cyclic thing. This is why actually you can encrypt A, because if you go 2 down, you know, it becomes Z and forward. Okay, so this is your ciphertext. You send this to other people and they move 2 upwards to obtain the plaintext. So it is a nice way. Actually, any elementary school kid can also come up with this idea, and maybe they already did. Also, people can design this. But in practice, this is not good, because if you know that if once you capture the ciphertext, if you can guess that it is encrypted by the Caesar cipher, what you can do is that, you know, move every letter 1 upward and see if it becomes something meaningful. If it doesn't, move one more and one more. And in the worst case, if you're using the English alphabet, there are 26 letters. You have to try 25, and you will obtain it. Okay. So in order to talk about this, I give some definitions like key space. In this example, your key spaces consist of 25 elements. Okay. So it is too small. In the worst case, you can do brute force attack, which means that you can try 25 things and obtain the secret key. So as you can see, our aim will be to increase this key space so nobody can perform a brute force attack. Okay. So if you look at the Caesar cipher with the notation I gave in the previous slides, the number of letters are 26. Ciphertext letters are identical, so you can choose K from 1 to 26, but if you apply 26 or 0, it wouldn't mean anything. Plaintext will be identical to ciphertext, so you have 25 keys, secret keys. So it is easy to guess. Okay, we cannot use it. Even if you don't want to try all of them, 25 keys, if you capture one message like this, plaintext and the ciphertext, by looking at it, you directly capture the secret key. And from the further messages you capture, you don't have to try all of them. You just know the secret key, and you capture the message. Okay. So we should increase the key space. So we should come up with a better algorithm. So the next step is to use the affine cipher. In order to increase the key space, this time we use two numbers, A and B. And this will be your secret key, both A and B as the key. And encrypt it as follows. When you have the plaintext letter here, and you have the secret key A and B, the ciphertext will be A times P plus B modulo 26, because we have 26 letters in English. So if it were Turkish, you have to replace this with 29 and so on. So here's an example. I chose A equals to 3 and B equals to 1. So whenever I encrypt C, I start numbering letters from 0. So 0. So A equals to 0, B equals to 1, C equals to 2. Since C equals to 2, what I do is that 3 times 2 plus 1, it becomes 7. And I go to the alphabet and look which is the 7th letter in the alphabet. Okay, this is how you encrypt it. So let me check if it is a correct way of doing it. Let me see if there is a problem. Currently, I couldn't see it, but maybe it is a correct choice of A and B. Okay, so here we also have the plaintext sizes 26, ciphertext sizes again 26, because we are working on modulo 26. And some people are not familiar with modulo 26. This means that actually the result is divided by 26, and the remainder is written here. Okay. Now, how you encrypt is as follows. So how you decrypt is also as follows. Once you obtain this letter, again, you write it as a number like 7. Then you have to multiply it with inverse of A minus inverse of B. So by inverse, we mean that in the modular arithmetic, A inverse means that once you multiply it with A, the result should be equivalent to 1 modulo 26. Okay, so your number is 3 here. So inverse of A will be a number that is, when multiplied with 3, gives you 1 modulo 26. Okay, so the question is that, does every number has an inverse in this alphabet? Here's an example. A can have an inverse in Zn. In our example, n is 26, so we work in modulo 26. If and only if the greatest common divisor of A and n equals to 1. So in our example, A was 3, n was 26. So the greatest common divisor of these two numbers is 1. So it worked. So let's give an example where this is not the case. Yeah. And also, by the way, there are only 12 possibilities where the greatest common divisor of A and 26 equals to 1. So this means that you cannot choose A as you wish. You have only 12 possibilities. Here's an example. I chose A equals to 2. If you look at it, the greatest common divisor of 2 and 26 is 2. So this means that 2 doesn't have an inverse. So what can go wrong if 2 doesn't have an inverse? Here's an example. You can perform the encryption anyway. If you go back to encryption algorithm, it is simply as this. So I chose A equals to 2 and B equals to 1. So I performed the encryption, but something went wrong because as you can see, E is mapped to J, R is also mapped to J. So once you want to decrypt this, you cannot be sure if J goes to E or J goes to R, right? This is because A doesn't have an inverse. This is the whole idea. So we somewhat increased the key space to 312 usable keys. We were expecting like this, 26 times 26. So we were expecting initially our key space has 676 elements, but it turned out that it is not that big. Even if it were 600, if you have the time, just you can get a pen and paper and try all of them. Still, 600 is not a huge space, okay? This is why we will move on to monoalphabetic substitution, and I will show you how you can increase it in a very nice way. But before going further, let me give you a definition. Classical crypto systems can be categorized according to the message units that the plaintext and the ciphertext are broken into. So if you substitute single letter with a single letter, as we did in the previous examples, we call them monographs, algorithms, okay? If you perform pair of letters, encrypt pair of letters with pair of letters. So in the next example, I will show you monoalphabetic substitution, which is this. Then I will show you Playfair cipher, which is digraph, replaces 2 letters with 2 letters. But you can go to triple of letters. This is called trigraph. But if you increase the numbers, you call it polygraph. And here are some examples. Here we have monograph examples, but you can turn them to digraph, shift cipher, and so you can modify them. So as you can see, you can increase these numbers. For instance, you can replace 8 letters with 8 letters. This would be nice. But using pen and paper and doing this is not that easy. This is why in the ancient times people didn't use that kind of stuff. So even in the First World War, people were using monoalphabetic substitution cipher. In the next lecture, I will show you how it is done and how you can break it. Okay. Then I will give you an example of Playfair cipher. Again, it was used in the First World War. And again, it can be broken easily. This is why then we move on to machines, then computers, and so on. But before moving on to more paper techniques, since in the ancient times people didn't have computers or machines, they started to come up with different devices. For instance, in our case, in all of these examples, we were using pen and paper methods. So our secret key was something we memorized. Here it was A equals to 2 and B equals to 1. So it is a secret information, right? But you can actually choose a physical secret key. So for instance, I have a wooden cylinder here. Let me show you here. Okay. So this stuff actually used as a secret key. Okay. So in the ancient times, you just gather this animal leather, and you put it like this. Okay. So you roll an empty leather. I did it deliberately to show you how you use it. So you put a empty letter. By empty, I mean no letters written on it. So you write your secret message as a line here. Then rotate it, write garbage letters here, rotate it, garbage letters here, again rotate it and write some garbage letters here. So once you unroll this letter, what you get is as follows. You get some random looking letters, okay? So in the ancient times, the soldier only takes this letter and transfers to the person who you want to communicate. So that person also has the identical wooden thing. So here actually woodmanship becomes important. So you can do it in a very different geometry. The radius and that kind of stuff becomes important. So you have to build two identical wooden cylinders and give the wooden cylinder to the person you want to communicate, so that in the future you can communicate using that cylinder. So if you roll it in a correct way, so let's see if I can do it. Okay. Yes, somewhat it is done. So if you look at it as a line, again, it looks like something meaningless because some lines are filled with unnecessary stuff. But if you look at here, so there is an arrow here. It says that you spy on. Maybe my camera shows it in a mirror way. I don't know. But it writes here, you spy on. So assume that this was the message you have written. So actually I like the cylinders. They are used in the past, but this was a gift from Eurocrypt 2013 conference. And in that conference, they explain how it is works. So for the historical information, they say that this is SkyTel is a cryptographic device that has been used in Greece as early as the 7th century BC, before Christ. A telling metaphor in a poem of Archilochus provides us with the evidence of that. So in a very old document, we see that this is used. During the Peloponnesian War, the use of skytales by the Spartans was widespread enough so that its name became synonymous to imported communication originating from the generals. A detailed description of how, presumably, a skytale was used for encryption is offered in Parallel Lives, the biographic work of Plutarch, in the chapter for Lysander, the famed admiral that led Sparta to win the Peloponnesian War against the Athenians. Okay, so the conference was held in Greece, so this was a very nice gift to have. Okay, so before pandemic, I actually give to all of you, but again, now I will show you from distance. Okay, so before the computers, before the machines, we had devices like this. Okay, so you can have even Jefferson disk and so on. So if you're interested, you can check the internet about these ancient devices.